podcast positioning, because at the end of the day, this is the cornerstone of everything we build further downstream. We, by the way, are assuming here that we know exactly who we are going after. So I didn't want to cover finding out about your ICP, because I think most people in this community already know their ICP, but that's obviously something that needs to be nailed down properly in order to be able to say, my podcast is going to target those people. Now, how do we design a podcast that attracts the attention of the right people, namely our ICP? Obviously, the name, the visual identity, the description, and how we talk about the show is going to be key. And we're going to cover some examples in here. But the theory is you reach out to someone to be a guest on the show, or someone learns about your podcast and they're your ICP, just from seeing the artwork or reading the name of it, they should be able to understand that this is for them. That's what you want to optimize for. Now, when you think about it, some big podcasts out there are about brands, right? And it is possible to build a brand, and it's just like, I don't know, the Huberman Lab, for instance. We understand that there is a lab, but we don't necessarily what this is going to be about. But they reached a point where the brand is so big that it's okay for them to go with that. When we are starting a podcast in the first few years, you want it to be crystal clear what the show is about, just from the name and the visual identity. So to give some examples, and then we're going to get into description as well. Consulting leaders. My target is consultants and B2B coaches. Like when I reach out to a consultant and I say, come be a guest on Consulting Leaders, it couldn't be more clear why the show at least is made for them. Are they going to accept or decline? That's another question, but at least the positioning is clear. Another example of a podcast that we support is ADHD Entrepreneur Accelerator. Crystal clear. This is for ADHD entrepreneurs who are looking to accelerate their business. Service Business Mastery. How to master your service business. The name is what's going to make it crystal clear from the get-go and oil the whole process for the downstream for listeners and potential guests. Visual identity, and that's something we didn't talk a lot about in the mastermind so far. You want it to be very simple. Like some people want to add many details, the logo of their company, the name, powered by some fancy designs. Simplicity and clarity beats complex and fancy every single day. That's something I said last week, and I'm going to repeat it. We want it to be crystal clear. Someone sees my podcast artwork, they're like, okay, cool, Consulting Leaders. They see Steve's podcast, they're like, okay, cool, this is for ADHD people. That's how crystal clear you want it to be. Adding a face, especially when you're the face of the podcast and the host is the face of the podcast, is usually a good thing because people connect with people and emotions and faces. So that's even better to oil the whole thing. Now, we work with some enterprise level companies. And here, because the host is going to be different from time to time, because we want it to be an enterprise asset more than a personal brand asset, there are scenarios where we go after just some designs and some graphics more than faces. Service Business Mastery is because there are two hosts in there, Josh and Tersh, and Josh has been added as a host like 5 years ago. So when there is a bit of rotation, when there is a bit of like specific requirements, we might want to have the visual identity a bit different. When we talk about description, so it's going to be the description in the podcast platforms, what's going to allow people to find your podcast as well. Discoverability is important, but it's also how you're going to talk about it, especially in the email when you reach out to guests. The way we do it for Consulting Leaders, for instance, is we describe it in one very simple sentence. What's the mission of the podcast? Consulting Leaders is a show where we interview B2B coaches and consultants about the business of consulting. The audience are other B2B coaches and consultants. Crystal clear positioning. This is the goal. This is the mission. This is why you're relevant. If you nail that properly, you're going to get the attention of the people that you want. Now, a little bit on the format. And here it comes down to what's the goal of the show, but we're assuming here we want to build a podcast to build a brand and acquire clients with it. You want to advertise it in a way that is, we are having conversations with leaders in, and here you put your ICP. For instance, we are having conversations with B2B coaches and consultants who have nailed something properly in their business. Like, this is for you. I've made this show for you. When you reach out to someone, or when someone reads the description of your show, you want them to think, man, this guy, this weird French accented guy, went all that way to just create a podcast just for me. Like, I'm going to listen to it. That's what you want to have happen in the mind of the person that you're targeting. We're going to talk about content as well, depending on the objective. When you want to be listened to by your ideal audience, which is what Steve does, right? He does one episode with a guest, one episode solo. Then it comes down to the topics of interest of your ICP. This sounds super simple, and it is, but so many people end up talking about stuff that is not directed towards the pain points of their ICP, the desired outcome of their ICP, or like how to implement the first steps on solving a problem. If you do a podcast that is not with a guest who is your potential client, and you're not talking about one of those three aspects, if the goal is to build a brand and generate clients out of it, this is not the right direction. And there could be reasons to that. I'm going to give one exception. Sometimes you want to interview someone who you're not going to end up doing business with, but who you know is going to give you access to an audience that you couldn't otherwise. A big influencer, a renowned expert thought leader in your space, who is a very niche expert on one specific aspect, which is not directly related to your audience, but because the meta concepts and the reach that you're going to get thanks to this guest makes sense to the show. That's usually the only exception that we allow. But we don't do this before episode 20 or 30, because at first we want to drive business results. And this is more a long-term play. If you run a professional services firms and you are not growing as fast as you'd like, then I'd like to give you a free gift. My team and I have put together the B2B Podcasting Secrets Playbook, which is basically 3 years of my teams and I knowledge, solving branding and lead generation for good for professional services firms. So if this is you, then your business growth is directly linked to the number and the quality of the relationships that you're able to build with actual decision makers, also whilst building reputation and brand. And we got pretty good at helping people like you do exactly that using podcast. So the playbook has 9 sections, from how to even position it, to finding the first guests, how to transform content and guests into clients, all the way up to becoming the #1 influencer in your space. It includes visuals, videos, text, and templates, and case studies relevant to each and every section. And if you want to go even faster, then on the thank you page, you can book a call directly with my team, and we will look at your firm, see if we can help. And if so, we'll put together a tailored plan for your specific podcast that you can use and implement.